Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the Free Hours. Your boy Tree, Trevor Turner, back with another video. We are back with another episode in our emotional intelligence series, Power of Connection through Emotional Intelligence. We focus on how emotional intelligence empowers us to connect with ourselves and others, leading to fulfilling relationships and personal and professional success. And we're on the letter D today. How do your emotions affect the decisions that you make every day? That's right. D is for decision making in the context of emotional intelligence. And what we're going to be talking about in this video today, we're going to be talking about how emotionally intelligent in decision making works. We're going to be talking about the impact of emotions on decision making, and of course, practical strategies for improving decision making skills. So let's dive right in, man. We'll talk about the link between emotions and decisions. Emotions influence our decision making, often without us even realizing it. For example, when you are feeling anxious, when you're feeling angry, when you're feeling scared, you can make more impulsive or risk-averse decisions. When you're going through a time of insecurity, when you're going through a time of feeling scared, when you're going through a time of feeling angry, you may not be emotionally ready to be able to make certain decisions that could possibly put certain aspects of your lifestyle or certain aspects of your livelihood at risk. So you could make more risk-averse decisions. Or on the flip side of that coin, when you're sad, when you're angry, when you're on a high frequency of whatever emotion that you have going on, you could make more impulsive decision-making. You could rush into things that you might not necessarily want to rush into. You could rush into things that you might not necessarily have taken the time to figure out all the options about or taken the time to figure out all the pros and cons for. You might hear something that makes you feel a certain type of way and just triggers you to go because you are in your emotions. You are in your feelings. It's just as simple as like when they say don't go to the grocery store hungry. Because what's going to happen is you're going to use that feeling of being hungry to pick up everything that your eyes see that trigger that feeling. Everything that your eyes see that agree with that feeling of hunger. It's shopping with your stomach and not with your head. It's making decisions about your job with your heart and not with your head. It's making decisions about your relationship with your heart and not with your head. Antonio Damasio, a neuroscientist whose work on the somatic marker hypothesis, explains that emotions impact decision-making by signaling potential risks and rewards. And Antonio Damasio suggests that emotions play a critical role in guiding decision-making, as emotions provide important information about the potential outcomes of choices. But one of the things we talked about last time is when we talked especially about aspects of the fight or flight, sometimes our emotions are reactions to things that are out of sync with actually what's going on in reality. A lot of times our emotions can be triggered by things that we're worried about in the future that haven't even happened yet or may not happen. We're worried about things that happened in the past that we're ashamed of or we're worried about repeating, worried about happening again. And those emotions that are based upon things that are not in sync with reality, not in sync with how severe those situations actually are, because they are still putting us in that survival, that fight or flight mode where we're just feeling like we have to make a move, we have to do something, we have to react in a certain way, and they may not be in sync with the reality of how severe these things actually are, and we'll make those decisions based upon faulty information. We'll make those decisions based upon fickle feelings, based upon a feeling that you may not have when you have to deal with the consequences of that decision, based upon a feeling that you may have when you go to look in your bank account and you say, okay, I shouldn't have spent that money. I shouldn't have bought this. I shouldn't have bought that. I shouldn't have went here. I shouldn't have did that. But then also dealing with the consequences of not pulling the trigger on investments, not pulling the trigger on trying to buy that business, not pulling the trigger on trying to go into business with somebody that you want to partner with because you were in your feelings at that moment. You let fear dictate what was going on. You let your personal feelings affect that, and you'll deal with the consequences of those things later, even though you may not have those same feelings later on. And of course, we're going to talk about the science behind emotions and decision making, talking about the role of the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. Prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for rational thinking and planning, and the amygdala, which processes emotional responses. They work together in decision making. And the thing about it is this, is unfortunately, our prefrontal cortex which is our rational, our logical, our human brain, right? And our amygdala, which is our reptile brain, or sometimes they call it the monkey brain, is our instinctual. It is our emotional. It is our fight or flight. It is our knee-jerk reaction. Unfortunately, the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala are in a lot of ways out of sync with each other evolutionarily. A lot of the connections that we have between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala are connections that are like wired in weird, different, like sideways or circumspect ways. A lot of times, that's why we have to consciously go through the effort of putting the space, and I always talk about this, putting the space between stimulus and response, because those connections are not always the most efficient connections. The most efficient connections may not be the most positive connections. The most efficient connections may pass through something else. Those feelings that you get that make you want to have those knee-jerk reactions may not pass through that section of your brain that can calmly react or can say the right thing. That's why a lot of times when we go through emotionally charged situations, we look back on those and we're like, damn, I should have said this. Damn, I should have did that. I should have done this, or I should have walked away, or I should have, because those connections are not as efficient as the punch him in the mouth or run away or go off or insult him or do this or say you quit before he fires you or whatever the case, those anxieties, those angers, those impulsive decision making. A lot of times those connections are more efficient, they're quicker than the connections between our monkey brain, our reptile brain, our instinctual brain, and our logical brain. And when we talk about that, we talk about Richard Davidson, neuroscientist at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He's known for his work on emotional regulation and brain plasticity. Brain plasticity is just that you can actually rewire how your brain works. You can, like, by consciously doing things in a different way, by being aware of your emotions, by being aware of what happens when certain things happen, and then taking that time to put that space between that emotional stimulus and your responses, you can actually slowly try to rework the connections in the brain. You can make those connections we just talked about that weren't super efficient, we can make them more efficient. We can make them be the default pathways for our neurons, for our brain cells. When he talks about that, he talks about how emotional regulation through mindfulness can strengthen the prefrontal cortex and decrease amygdala activity, helping individuals make more thoughtful decisions. Because, like I said before, the connections between amygdala and prefrontal cortex, they're not super efficient all the time. What's going to happen is when you drop into that mode, when you drop into those feelings, when you drop into those emotions, especially the emotions that revolve around things like fear, but especially those emotions that revolve around survival, especially about those emotions that revolve around our insecurities, which are, the primary emotions. Like usually anger, that's a secondary emotion. A lot of times it's related to fear. You're afraid somebody's going to attack you. You're afraid somebody's going to try and hurt you. You're afraid somebody is going to try to do something to you. And the anger comes out as a secondary emotion because of that. So when you drop into those primary emotions that are like fear, that are like hunger, that are like all of those base things, that's when your amygdala takes over. And like I said, those connections aren't super strong and super efficient to go back through and filter through our prefrontal cortex. So what we can do is through mindfulness, we strengthen our prefrontal cortex. We give more control to our prefrontal cortex. When we drop into those modes where our fists start to clench, we drop into those modes where our heart starts beating real fast. When we drop into those modes, into those fight or flight modes, our prefrontal cortex will actually stay activated. And I know I'm probably saying this obviously in probably like the most non-scientific way possible and using scientific terms with it, but that's the way I understand it. Because one of the things that I've gone through, one of the things that I've noticed when I have changed the way and my perspectives, changed the way that I react, changed the way that I move based upon how I feel, I always put that space between emotional stimulus and any response that I give. I know a lot of times now I don't have to look back and say I should have done this. I don't get those great ideas in hindsight. You know how they say hindsight is 20/20. I don't get those great ideas in hindsight. I'm getting more of them now. Obviously, I'm not perfect. Obviously, when things like major things happen, I'm going to react in emotion. I'm going to react in sadness. I'm going to react in loss. I might react in anger, out of fear. I might react out of any of those things. But what happens is that more often than before, because of my mindfulness, more often than before, because of me actively putting the space between it and being aware of my emotions, I am able to get those ideas about how to handle situations, about the words that I should say, about the words I should not say, about the things that I should do and about the things I should not do, from my prefrontal cortex in the moment. In the heat of the moment, in the heat of what's going on, I'm still able to concentrate, still able to focus, and still able to think. And that is scientifically backed up by Richard Davidson. When emotional regulation through mindfulness, it strengthens our prefrontal cortex. And then, of course, when we talk about stress or when we talk about fear, those are two things that can activate the amygdala. Those lead to impulsive decisions based upon short-term emotional responses rather than long-term logic. Now, when you think about stress, a lot of stress is related to fear. A lot of stress is related to fear of losing something, fear of losing your job, fear of security, fear of losing your relationship, fear of losing status, whatever the case may be, right? It puts you under stress. It's a lot of pressure. And when you think about that, what happens is that when you are not just fully present in the moment, fully accepting of the situation, fully accepting of life as it is on life's own terms, and realizing like, okay, can I change this? If I can, I'm going to change it. I'm not going to let it stress me. I'm not going to let it control me. I'm not going to let it weigh down on me. I'm just going to either change it or I'm going to let it be and let it go. And I'm going to monitor it. And when the time comes that I can actually make the change to the situation, I'm going to do the work to make the change to that situation. It's about having the courage to change the things that you can, but then also the serenity to accept the things that you can't, because you need to be able to be present right now in this present moment, not worried about the future, not regretting the past, not worried about what may come around the corner. And that's where a lot of this stress comes from. And when we are stressed, when we get into that mode, a lot of times we try to escape. It's about resistance to what is. We don't like where we're at. We don't like what we're going through. We don't like our situation. We don't like our job. We don't like this person that we're around. We don't like the person that our wife or our husband has become, and we get put under stress. We don't like how our kids are acting. We don't like how things are going with them at school. We don't like how things are going at work, and we start getting stressed because we're not accepting of the situation. We're not accepting of the fact that there are opportunities in everything. We're not accepting of the fact that there are things that we can be grateful for even in our shitty situations. So what we're doing is that we're letting the stress get to us, and that's where we start to make the impulsive and escapist and those having that escape mentality, trying to get away from what's going on. That's when the get-rich-quick schemes start to get us. That's when those people who call on the phone and say, when they used to call on the phone to the older people and they say that they inherited money, they didn't believe it because that person was so convincing. They don't believe those emails because those emails are spelled right and presented all well and are just so convincing. They believe it because they are under so much stress that their amygdala sees opportunity and jumps at it. It doesn't filter through the prefrontal cortex. That's why people fall for the things that sound too good to be true, because they are under so much stress, under so much desire to escape their current situation, so much desire to escape that future that hasn't even happened yet, so much desire to escape the past that doesn't even exist anymore, so much desire to get away from what it is that's going on, to get away from that stress, to get away from that fear, to get away from that anger, to get away. It's the fight or flight. And that is how that decision making gets affected. That is why people go for things that are too good to be true. That's why when you hear the things that people fall for in your comfortable situation or in your comfortable mind or in your right mind, you don't ever think like, oh wow, that sounded like a good thing. I'm surprised that didn't fall through. You always think like, man, that sounded like a pyramid scheme from the jump. I don't know why they believe that. Like, damn, why would a dude called you and said that you had this money, you just needed to send him some money or buy a gift card or do this, that, whatever. Why would you believe that? Because you are in a calmer state of mind. You are in a place that you are not so stressed that you need to escape what's going on. You see these things for what they are because you're in your prefrontal cortex and not in your amygdala. You're in your long-term logic and not your short-term emotional responses. It's like people who go to prison for crimes of passion. It's like people who go to prison for making bad decisions based upon finances. It's like all those people who, when COVID hit and they lost their jobs, they turned to selling drugs. It's because we were so scared. It's because I was so scared of losing everything. I was so scared of losing this new relationship that I had just got. I was so scared of losing all of my friends. I was so scared of losing my car. I was so scared of losing my house. I was so scared of losing my parents. I was so scared of losing everything. I was so scared of being broke and not having power in any of the situations that I was in because of this worldwide pandemic. And because of that, my emotions completely clouded everything that I was doing, to the point where when I finally got to a level of comfort, when I was finally doing something to where I didn't have to worry about losing anything anymore, I was so stuck in it. But at the same point in time, I was looking around what the fuck am I doing? Why did I make this decision? How did I even get here? Once I got into that place where I could take the step back and look at things with my long-term logic, I was like, damn, I've been fucking up. I've been doing this bad. But by the time I was able to get there, it was series after series after series of emotionally charged, short-term bad decisions that led to case. By the time I got to the point where I was able to actually take that step back, I was 2 cases in, fighting cases, on bail, and I was like, damn, what did I do? What did I do to myself? And, by that time, it wasn't necessarily too late, but I was already committed. I knew things were going to change. I knew I was going to end up going to prison because of the cases I was fighting. But I was just like, man, there's no long-term, nothing to this. There was no long-term plan to it. There was no exit plan. There was no way out of it. There was no thinking about what I was doing to the community. There was no thinking about what I was doing to myself. There was no thinking about what I was doing to my friends. There was no thinking about any of that. It was all just short-term, get away from this fear. Short-term, get away from this insecurity. Short-term, get away from this powerlessness. And that's an example of bad decision-making based upon an emotionally charged state. Now, it may be something that's a little bit more simple for you. You may not take the plunge into the deep end of just going all the way left like I went. But I'm sure that there are things in your life where you can say, you know what, I made a bad decision based upon fear. I made a bad decision based upon how I felt at the time. A lot of times it happens in relationships. Sometimes it happens with jobs. Sometimes it happens with investments. Sometimes it happens with the investments we haven't made yet because we're scared, because we're worried about our kids, worried about our wife, worried about our husband, worried about what other people are going to think, worried about failure. So we make those short-term emotional decisions instead of those long-term logical decisions. So, of course, now that we've talked about all the pitfalls and all the dangers, see, I got my notes. I'm like a news reporter, up here, you know what I'm saying? Let's talk about how to improve our decision-making with emotional intelligence. Step 1, develop self-awareness. And this is basically the first, when we talked about awareness, we talked about it in our first video, in our A video for our emotional intelligence. Self-awareness in recognizing how emotions affect your decisions is the building block to making better decisions. It's about being able to point out what's causing you to make certain decisions. Because in hindsight, like we always say, hindsight is 20/20. We are always able to look back and say, you know what, that was a bad decision. A lot of times we end there, though. When we talk about our awareness, especially in the context of emotional intelligence, it's about going further than that. It's about going further than identifying our bad decisions. It is about going into the why we made those decisions in the first place. It's going about what led us into that situation where we even had to make that decision. It's about whether that was a real situation or a conjured up situation in our head. We go back and we take the look at it and we say, okay, was that a prefrontal cortex decision or was that an amygdala decision? And that is where we get into the core of it. That's where we get into the crux of it. That's where we get into the meat and potatoes of it. When we start to be aware of where we went wrong and then also aware of why we went wrong. Take the other people out of the equation. Take those people you want to blame out of the equation. Take your coworkers out of the equation. Take your friends out of the equation. Take your boss out of the equation. Take everybody out of the equation except for you and your emotional state in that time that you were making that decision, in that place that you were in when you were making that decision, in what it is that you were worried about, what it is that you were scared of, what it is that you were sad about, what it is that you were going through. Take all those people out and just look at yourself. Self-awareness. Awareness of your motherfucking self. And one of the things that I want to, kind of give you guys is I want to give you, a little simple exercise. I like to give you guys little simple exercises now, is where you pause before making decisions. It's just about putting that gap. It's about putting that gap. Except now we're filling the gap with something. Pause before making your decision. Ask yourself how you're feeling in that moment. Ask yourself whether the emotions are affecting the choice that you're about to make. Ask yourself that before making decisions. And a lot of times what you can do, and it can get redundant, it can get old, but the thing is, if you're not good at the self-awareness, you will make a lot of decisions throughout your day, and you won't even realize that you've been making those decisions. You'll be doing it on autopilot. You won't realize which ones were emotionally charged. You won't realize which ones were being influenced by emotions until a little bit later on. But if you take the time, every time you think about it, take the time to stop and start looking at all the decisions that you're about to make, and ask yourself how you're feeling. Ask yourself if your emotion is affecting which options that you're looking at. Ask yourself if your emotions are affecting where you're about to go. And then as you get better at it, you'll be able to kind of separate which ones are big decisions and which ones are smaller decisions. You'll be able to check yourself. You'll be able to do little temperature checks on yourself throughout the day. And you'll be able to do them like that. You'll be able to do them a lot easier. So next, we're going to talk about practicing emotional regulation. Emotional regulation techniques like deep breathing, mindfulness, or journaling. They help manage emotions before making decisions. One of the things, after we've practiced enough self-awareness, after we've kind of seen what categories or what situations start to come up a lot that actually are affected by emotions, that are affected by fear, that are affected by insecurity, that are affected by sadness, that are affected by anger. When we find ourselves impulsive in certain areas, what we can do is we can start to go through these different little exercises to start to unpack why our feelings are controlling these things. We can start to unpack and regulate how our emotions are affecting us. And that's what we do. And that's the plasticity part of it, is we actually, once we do that enough, we start to get into that on autopilot. We don't have to take necessarily such a long pause and like journal something all the way out. We'll be able to take the long pause and say, okay, what am I feeling? Let me take my feelings out of it. You won't have to ask yourself why you feel the way you feel anymore. You won't have to ask yourself why it is that your emotions are affecting you in that way anymore, because you'll be so used to it. It'll be something that's so practiced. And I encourage you to delay decision making when emotions are running high. Revisit the decision when you feel more balanced. Take about the same amount of time that you would normally take to look back on a situation and say, damn, I should have did this or I should have did that. And make the decision at that time instead of at the time when you're angry. If you're not able to unpack, if you're not able to regulate in that moment, if you're not able to put the gap in that moment and make a decision that is based upon logic instead of emotion, just don't make the decision at that time. Just don't make it. Know that you still have to make it at some point in time. Give yourself a time that you're going to make it, and let yourself cool off and calm down. Then we talk about integrating empathy. Empathy is a key component of emotional intelligence, and it can improve decision-making in interpersonal situations. By considering the feelings and perspectives of others, you can make more thoughtful and fair decisions. When you consider other people's emotions, it can lead to more positive and productive outcomes. And obviously, these are the decisions that you have to make when you're dealing with other people. Put yourself in their shoes for a quick second. Think about how these decisions are going to affect those people. But then also, in the emotionally charged situation that is dealing with somebody else, put yourself in their shoes to where you can figure out, you can get to the bottom of why it is that they're acting the way that they're acting to begin with. Because a lot of times, we're taking things personal that we shouldn't. A lot of times we're making incorrect assumptions about what's going on. A lot of times we're not realizing that that other person could be acting out of fear or misapprehension or insecurity. We're not realizing that that person could be going through the same things that we're going through, that we think that they're putting us in the situation of. They think that we're putting them in that situation. If you practice empathy, you'll be able to circumvent a whole lot of this stuff. You'll be able to improve communication. You'll be able to put these decisions off that have to do with other people, to where you can make better, more positive, and above all, productive decisions. So now let's talk about applying emotional intelligence to decision making. For personal decisions, applying emotional intelligence in personal decision making can lead to better long-term results, such as managing finances or handling personal relationships. And we talked about this a lot of times when we talked about making decisions in the heat of the moment, like in an argument. They can be harmful. How emotional regulations and empathy can improve outcomes, because there are a lot of people right now that are locked up because they made decisions in the heat of the moment, decisions that they regret, decisions they wish they could take back, decisions that they have to deal with the consequences of, even though they no longer have the feelings that they felt when they made the decision. There are a lot of unemployed people who quit their job based upon some feelings that they had in that moment, feelings that they couldn't regulate, feelings that they couldn't control, and feelings that they acted on when they quit their job, when they turned in their resignation, when they thought they could get a better job. There are a lot of people at worse situations because they thought the grass was greener, because they let their emotions make the decision for them. When you make decisions in the heat of the moment, when you make decisions in your emotion, a lot of times you're making the wrong decision. When we talk about managing finances, especially, when we talk about impulsive buys, when we talk about people who are buying things to fill that void, when we talk about people who are so scared of losing their money that they will not let their money grow or work for them. Because if you're scared of losing the money, you're not going to let it out of your clutches long enough to work for you. You're not going to let it out of your clutches long enough to build. You're not going to let it out of your clutches long enough to accrue any type of interest. You're not going to do any type of investing. You're not going to do any type of things to make that money work for you if you're so scared of letting it out of your clutches, because you're afraid of losing everything. You're afraid of insecurity. And also when it comes to relationships, especially for men nowadays, we're afraid of being played. We're afraid of being misused. We're afraid of being mishandled. So we make bad decisions out of those fears. We make bad decisions based upon our fears of the expectations that other people are going to have for us, because the loudest people on social media are saying some of the dumbest shit when it comes to relationships. So we're scared and we make bad decisions. And it's the same with women. Scared, you make bad decisions. You're fearful, you make bad decisions. Out of anger, you make bad decisions. And then, of course, professional decisions. Emotional intelligence plays a crucial role in leadership and teamwork. Emotionally intelligent leaders, they make better decisions by considering the emotions and needs of their team, resulting in more cohesive and successful workplaces. Look, when you have a boss, when you have someone who is in a leadership position, who is able to put themselves in your shoes and put themselves from your perspective and think about things from your perspective, about how the things are going on in your personal space, and they're also able to put themselves in your shoes when it comes to analyzing your strengths and weaknesses. They are able to use your strengths to the utmost, and they're able to downplay your weaknesses to the utmost. They're able to use you in a place that is beneficial for you. They're able to put you in a place where you can thrive. They're able to put you in a place where you can be secure. They're able to put you in a place in better places. Those people that don't give a fuck about you, to them, you're just a cog in the wheel. Unfortunately, those people who don't have that empathy, those people who don't have that emotional intelligence when it comes to leadership, they try to fit cogs in places that they don't belong. A lot of times when you're working and leading a team, a lot of times when you're trying to run a business, a lot of times when you're trying to lead people, you have to realize that it is not like as much like an assembly line as you think it is. A lot of times it is like a luxury watch. These luxury watches, which have all these intricate gears and they fit together in perfect ways. And if you try to take these gears and put them in different places, the whole shit doesn't work. It's never the same again. As soon as you try to take one gear and put it in the wrong spot, as you try to take something and put it in a place that it is not comfortable in, put it in a place that it does not fit in, put it in a place that it will not thrive in. Not only does it affect that position, not only does it affect that part of the function of the watch, it affects the function of the entire system, your business, or the business that you're managing, the business that you're taking care of, the business that you're in a leadership role at. You affect the whole functioning of it by not having the ability to look at things from other people's perspective. You just think that's a body. I can put you wherever I want to put you, and you're going to listen, and you're going to do it. Not realizing that this person doesn't fit in that role. This person doesn't fit as well in this role as that role. This person doesn't have the same strengths as this person, but this person's weaknesses are downplayed by this person's strengths. If you put this person in that position, if you put this person in the position where they can thrive and not just survive, where they can come to work in a way that is going to be beneficial to you and beneficial to them as well. Because when you uplift them, you uplift the whole system. It's one of the tenets, sociological tenets that we were talking about in sociology, structural functionalism. Everything has its own place. Everything is a piece of a puzzle. And if you try to jam that piece of that puzzle piece into somewhere where it doesn't fit, you don't just fuck up that piece, you fuck up the whole puzzle. When you don't have emotional intelligence, when you're not able to have empathy, when you're not able to take your feelings out of decision making and put other feelings in, or be able to make that gap between so that you can make mutually beneficial decisions. You're not just fucking up that person's what they got going on. You're fucking up everything that you got going on too. So now let's talk about overcoming challenges in emotionally intelligent decision making. Let's talk about managing emotional biases. To overcome emotional bias that may affect decision making, such as confirmation bias or overconfidence, one of the things that I suggest always is to seek feedback from trusted individuals to ensure your decisions are not overly influenced by emotions. Because one of the things that could happen is that we get to that point where we think we just got it figured out. We've practiced a little bit of self-awareness. We've done a couple journaling exercises. We've made a few good decisions that were based on long-term logic and not short-term emotional regulation. So now it's like, okay, now we get a little bit of overconfidence under our belt. We're like that person who's low in martial arts. They still got the white belt. They might have the yellow belt, but they think they know how to fight all of a sudden. They think they know how to go to tournaments all of a sudden. They think that they can win first place. They can win these big trophies. They think they can handle themselves against 3-4 dudes on the street. You seek feedback from trusted individuals to say like, look, you've been making some progress, but here's still where you're lacking. Something's going on here that's out of whack, that's off kilter. Something's going on here that's not the same as these new decisions that you've been starting to make. And then dealing with uncertainty. Emotions like fear of the unknown can paralyze decision making. Emotional intelligence helps build resilience and the ability to make decisions despite uncertainty. Embrace uncertainty. Focus on gathering information, consulting others, managing emotional reaction. Focus on the opportunity that is in risk, the opportunity that is in the unknown. Because here's the thing, you're scared of what you don't know. You're scared of what may be out there, what may be in the darkness, what may be around the corner. You're scared of the things that you aren't knowledgeable of. That's fine. When you start to venture into places that you don't know, that means you're making progress. When you start to venture into places where you have to ask other people, that means you're making progress. That means you're in new settings. That means you're in new spheres. That means you're in a new atmosphere. Embrace those opportunities. Embrace the opportunities to learn something. Embrace the opportunities to find out something. Embrace that unknown as an opportunity to learn everything that you need to do. Embrace that opportunity. Embrace it as the opportunity to know what it is that you're doing. Embrace it so that you can manage your emotional reaction to risk. If you go into every risk situation knowing like, damn, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to do something different. This is an opportunity to do something well. This is an opportunity to collaborate. This is an opportunity to learn something. This is an opportunity to clear that darkness. It's an opportunity to figure things out in a new way or look at things in a new perspective. What happens is you do that enough times and risk will become the norm. Risk will become comfort. Discomfort will become comfort. And then also, it's like the thing about lobsters. Lobsters are in their shell until they're so uncomfortable and so cramped that they literally have to break out of that new shell in order to grow. Look at every risk situation. Look at every fearful situation. Look at every new situation. Look at every uncomfortable situation as an opportunity to grow. And that's probably one of the best ways that I can talk about to overcome some of the obstacles to making good decision making. And that's it, man. We've talked about the role of emotions in decision making. We talked about some of the science behind it. We've talked about how to improve decision making using emotional intelligence, practical applications in personal and professional life. One of the things that I would encourage you guys to do is to start applying emotionally intelligent decision-making in your daily lives by practicing the self-awareness, emotional regulation before you make your important choices. Start with your awareness so that you can go back to the choices you've already made, so that you can start to see where emotions are affecting you, so that you can start to see what places you need to regulate yourself more. And then when you get into similar situations, practice that regulation. It's not hard to make decisions when you know what your values are. Keep your values in mind. Keep where it is that you want to go in mind. And realize that that person that you're trying to become is not getting there by being scared. All right? This has been your boy Tree. D is for decision making. If you like the video, like it, comment on it, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much. Deuces.